Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Jim Kroft Podcast, where I explore creative life, the digital economy, and how we can grow as people in this bonkers modern world. Today, I'm incredibly excited to speak with not only one of the most famous producers in the world, but also one of its most beloved, Gordon Raphael. Now, it's fair to say that Gordon's work with the Strokes helped transform music in the early noughties, and its influence continues to resonate in music today. Our conversation marks a significant moment for the podcast, not only because it's the first recorded in New York City, but also because it was captured right after a pounding day in the studio with Gordon himself in the production seat. As is the tradition on the podcast, I like to tell you about my personal connection with my guests. So I first met Gordon shortly after I moved to Berlin in 2007. I'd arrived with my band at the time, Myriad Creatures, and as fate would have it, we ended up squatting in an abandoned building on Friedrichstrasse. From there, we had a view that overlooked the sculptures, silhouettes, and decadent vibrancy of the Tacklers arts community, where we ended up playing hundreds of shows. They were beautiful, edgy, and sometimes painful days as we tried to make our life from scratch in a new country. Now, though our apartment had no running water or electricity, we managed to source the fuses which powered those old DDR buildings. And soon this apartment, surrounded by the remnants of lives left behind when the wall came down, became not only our rehearsal room, but also an underground rock and roll hub where bigger bands like the Kooks would play wild after-show gigs after their own concerts ended. One night, a strange psychedelic troubadour played, and I was immediately captivated by his sound, driven by the timeless groove of then IMX drummer Tom Marsh. Gordon Raphael had entered my life. With our own album stalling, we asked him to take over production, and it sparked a friendship which has now lasted many years, including him contributing to my Boat for Sarah project, which raised the money for a search and rescue boat during the refugee crisis in 2016. Now, this all led to New York this year, where Gordon welcomed me into Mercy Sound Studios, making a lifelong dream of recording in the East Village a reality. After laying down my new song, Wicked Things, we sat down to record today's episode. In it, Gordon reveals his Maverick wisdom, tells tales of life in the arts strewn across New York, Berlin, and London, and holds nothing back in exploring everything from his battle with addiction, his views on social media, and encouraging us to live life on life's terms. Having the great G-Raf on a podcast is one of the honors of my life, the culmination of a friendship, and a celebration of a man that, like so many others, I also love dearly. If you're ready, then let's dive in. So I'm in the studio with Mr. Gordon Raphael, and it's a great pleasure to be here and to see you again, Gordon.
Thank you, Jim. It's good to see you. Thanks for coming to New York.
It's my first time recording in New York, and it's been a lifelong dream, so thank you for having me here.
Was the producer any good?
Well, the producer, well, we got a few things to say about him, actually.
Yeah, but at least the assistant was charming.
They're very charming. Well, you know what? It's the second time that this producer's got the call. Third time this producer's got the call in my life, so he's got to be doing something right.
Good deal.
And so we're in this wonderful studio at the moment called Mercy Sound Studios in the East Village. And this is a sort of unusual podcast, especially in my life at least, because I've never done a podcast immediately after a full days in a studio rock and roll session. And so is that an experience you've ever had before?
Probably so.
Probably
yes.
So, yeah.
Well, I can't remember because, yeah.
Yeah, well, my mind is beautifully jumbled between kind of howling out vocals and just the intensity of getting it right. But it's an amazing experience as a musician to be in with you, Gordon, because you have this very particular energy with your approach in the studio. And I always kind of think of momentum as being like something at the sort of apex of your philosophy. How would you describe your philosophy of the studio?
Philosophy of the studio. I think I have one mantra that I've seemed to notice myself say for years now. As soon as something happens, I go, okay, what's next for fun around here? And the musicians look very like, is that a professional thing? What does he mean for fun? Is he thinking our music is fun or what? But really it's like, what would you like to do? You want to sing something? You want to have a break? You want to do a guitar part? So I think I'm always looking to keep everybody interested. And, the biggest button I have in the studio is the one that makes the musician smile. Mm-hmm. And more than looking at the graphs and the computer I'm looking at the musicians' faces that I'm working with, making sure that they're having a great time. And I think that's the core of my philosophy in the studio.
One thing that I loved about today as we were recording is that every time I'm about to do a vocal take, you're like, have fun.
Right. It's the last thing singers are thinking about. They're thinking about, I got to get those notes right, and I got to do better than before. And I hope my tone's good. It's like, just when I say that, it just puts everybody off of whatever they were thinking. And they kind of think, is that a joke? And then they start singing, and it's pretty funny.
I remember this years ago when we first recorded. It was in Berlin. I was in a band called Myriad Creatures, and I remember I was the lead guitarist in the band. I remember going in. I was feeling insecure because I wasn't a lead guitar in the way that one thinks of lead guitarists, and I just remember going in, and it made me feel like Jimi Hendrix after my first take. And I played 20% better, I think, than I'd ever played before, and it was such a lesson for me.
Yeah, I think that is really the result of my secret plan. As it really is about letting people feel so comfortable and so relaxed and having such a good time that they actually play and sing better. And that's really, you could have great microphones and everything, but if you're not getting the best powerful performance out of it, it's all for nothing.
But let's not disassociate the intensity and the focus of the sessions, because if one wasn't to know you and your history, you might think, well, that sounds la-di-da-di-da, music's all fun, and yet there's an incredible sense of discipline and focus. So how do what's your sort of secret sauce for marrying this intensity and work ethic and discipline and keeping it on the front foot with this sense of lightness? That's a very hard thing to do.
Well, I think it comes from years of working on my own music in studios and realizing that you want to get everything done. You don't want to waste any time getting lost in details or lost in like side project things. So I like to just kind of keep it focused, keep it rolling. That was good. You listen. Do you see that that's good too? Okay, now it's time to do the next thing. I really like to just move along and keep the musicians active all the time. Thinking all the time.
Well, I was reading The World Is Going to Love This, your wonderful book, which we will get to, and I can't wait to get to it as well. And I remember when you were talking about when you were in a Chateau Relaxo, and you were right, you had a little bit of time for yourself. And I was reading it on the plane over, and before I started reading this section, I was thinking, am I an idiot because I'm just in New York for a week and I've got the budget for one day in the studio, and I was like, am I underselling myself to just try and get a song done in one day? Am I being kind of crazy and just assuming too much? And then I started reading the book, and then I just saw this wonderful section, and you were working on your own music, and you were like, and some days I was knocking out 2 or 3 songs per day. And I just thought, that's the spirit of rock and roll, and something that's too often missed. And, where did that come from? Just that sort of hunger to create like that, because that's a lot. 3 songs in a day. It
took a long time as a musician to get to the point when I heard myself play or heard a recording that instead of like covering my face in shame, that I was actually like, that sounds good. And when I come back tomorrow, it still sounds good. So it's like this breakthrough point where you trust yourself, you appreciate what your own self is doing. And so it kind of takes a lot of the guesswork and the worry out of the equation. So even if I did something that had a drum machine, a synthesizer line, and some poetry, if I listen to it and, wow, it sounds finished, that's a cool little piece. Now I'll do another one. It could have only taken a couple of hours, but my ear told me that it's done. I don't want to add more parts. I don't want to rethink it. I don't want to do it better. It's cool. Now what else do I feel like doing? I feel like playing a guitar now. So I was always just kind of enjoying my day with music and letting my hands decide what instrument it wanted to play and going from there.
So is that belief to be in the creative process? And when I came in here, I felt similarly once again sort of disarmed. And one of the things that I loved about when I came into Mercy Sound Studios today was I had this song, Wicked Things, and I had this incredibly intense few days because I was in this wild state of busyness as you can get sometimes with my work before coming over, and then I had 2 days to get this song together. One of the things that I loved about when I came in was you listen to the song and you were like, look, Jim, we can, let's just take this one by one. We had a drummer coming in. What a great player. What a hero of the scene. Came and he nailed it down in a couple of takes. You got this insane sound out of this tiny room. Mm-hmm. And then you were like, look, let's focus on the fundamentals. But the thing that I'm pointing out is that you were like, look, the bass playing is really cool from the demo. Mm-hmm. The guitar playing is really great. Why don't we focus on the absolute essentials of what we can do in a day? Mm-hmm. And I really enjoyed so much, again, that capacity to give trust back. So I was like, wow, Gordon's in the studio every day and he's saying, look, you're in a great direction here. And I feel like you made such a great call in our working day to make the most out of it. And I really valued that part. Is that something that you often do, is when a band's coming in with stems and they've got a few good things in there? Mm-hmm. How often do you mix and merge, or what's your way there?
When someone plays me something like, here's what I did at home in Logic, and I go, what is that crazy keyboard sound? Oh my God. He goes, yeah, I just did this with a plug-in. And I said, is the song we're doing in the same tempo? Yeah. Would you just airdrop that to me in the computer? And I oftentimes use pieces of people's home demos that they spent hours crafting to put in a final production, because I don't want to have to do it over. Yeah. And I'm afraid I won't be able to do it as well as they did spending hours at home doing it. Yeah. Whereas some things like drums and vocals, I know that with the equipment I have in the studio and the sounds I can get, I can make it much higher.
But that's the thing, that's the spirit that I got from your music, is that, you're in there and you've got that sort of love of sound, of experimentation, and just trying to find a twist with whatever you're doing. And I love the fact that you don't apply that as, in an ego way with everything you hear. You still seem to have that sort of like wonderful, almost like beginner's attitude when you hear a sound that you love to go with it. Do you think that sense of a beginner's mind is that something that you're conscious of in terms of as you're looking for experimental or avant-garde or strange or sounds? What's your thinking there?
I think listening to music all the time, from the time I was a little kid, somehow I just was able to keep a spirit of being a fan all the time. Like if something sounds good, I get really excited. That's why I listen to music. That's why I work on music. Imagine how boring it would be if you just were tired of music and just another drum sound, whatever. It's like something about great sound and great songs, lyrics, performances, it really makes me excited. And so when I hear something good, I always want to be a fan and say, hey, that's really great. It's just a natural thing. And the reward is that I work with a lot of artists almost all the time where I'm completely thrilled with whatever we're working on. Sounds great and it's really exciting.
Well, I love that today, because I was like, you were like, hey, what a great bass sound. And I was like, I'm no bass player. And I was like, oh, dude, I'm a bass player now. Like this. The creative process. So 2 questions. How would you describe your own creative process as in regard to songwriting? Right. And then to draw that out to maybe give inspiration to someone who's feeling stuck or looking for something extra in their own creative process, where would your mind go?
Well, I think there's 2 levels to how I work on music. One is that I started playing piano when I was a little kid, took lessons and practiced all the time, and I hated it. I just couldn't. I was no good. My teacher had 8 and 10-year-old kids that could play way better than me at age 16 and 17. I was like, music was not natural for me, but I knew it was what I wanted to do. So I kept doing it and doing it and doing it until I could do like magical tricks. I could, on keyboard, I could do this thing. And I found these chords and I now made a song. So everything is like discovery and remembering things. So now when I want to make a song, I'll think like, what I just don't even think about it. I don't think, I'm going to think about some chords and I'm going to think about a story and I'm going to get ready to I just say like, what do I feel like doing today? I feel like playing a guitar. I feel like using a drum machine. I'll make a beat. Oh, that's cool. And I record it right away. And then I think, what does that need? Well, I'll get a synthesizer bass. So I just start letting my hands play some music. And when it sounds good, I record it, and then I can immediately hear what instrument should come next. Is it a bass, a guitar, a poem, a piano? So things like that. It just starts very innocently with what my hands want to do, and then my imagination and my ears get involved to build it into a song.
And is that search for the spark? Does that just come out of you? Is it a daily thing? Is it a muscle that you exercise daily, or do you wait for it?
I think it starts with the sound. So I've never made a song on something that sounded bad or something normal. Like very rarely an acoustic guitar, but I did write some songs on acoustic guitar. It's like I'll just play with my synthesizer until I come up with this weird noise. Wow, what could I do with it? Well, or this drum pattern, or these twist the sounds of the drums so that the kick drum's really low and the snare drums echoed back and forth and the hi-hat's flanging like a rocket ship. And I'll just start building a beat with these weird sounds, and that's what gives it, I can hear a song now taking place. So everything starts with already producing something before it's even a song, just like producing a sound and then making it tell a story.
And so what about the role of harmony? One of the things I really enjoyed about, which we'll talk about later, a lovely observation regarding the Strokes when they came in, is that you were likening their sound with how they orchestrate their sounds as being nothing like the sort of the Seattle grunge sound or the heavy metal sound, but actually about counterpoint.
Right.
And you would have all of the instruments doing their own melodies, and it was almost subconsciously done, but in a very conscious way. And you talk about Julian Casablancas as a songwriter. But in terms of your own work, you've also got like a very sort of deep harmonic knowledge. So what's the tension between when you sit down? Because the reason I ask with the writing is if I sit down with a prophet or something, that's cool and I can go into sound and stuff, but it doesn't always open up the capacity for, let's say, a more dense harmonic progression, for instance, or something. So will you really be going for sounds first, or are you sometimes just looking for a chord sequence that is just taking you out?
No, I kind of make the bed of the song innocently from whatever's around. I'm not really thinking about it. I'm just, this sounds cool. Let's record it. Okay. And at that point, I go into a different process because I've been playing music so long, so many instruments. Like I was on stage at 13 playing in bands and everything, that as soon as I hear something, my imagination can hear the next part. Oh, it's a synthesizer sound that goes like, meow, and I know the melody and I know the sound, and I can just reach over to the synthesizer and make that sound in a second, and I can just reach for the key, even though I don't know what key I made that original. My fingers just find it in a moment, and I have the next melody and then the next thing that goes on top of it. So I'm orchestrating by hearing the sound in my mind and the part that should go there, and then just finding it and putting it on very quickly. You know, I don't have to work at it very hard or rehearse it very much. Just it's very easy.
So if someone's listening, someone who, let's say they feel that creative fire and maybe they are a songwriter and they started writing, but they're listening to that and they're going, well, that's amazing for Gordon and what an amazing guy. And he's got that capacity to go off into space. But for that person who feels like they've got that creative fire, or they're maybe feeling a bit blocked, they want to start something and they can't get to it, how would you extract something from that creative sense of adventurousness that you've got and some type of encouragement for that person who doesn't necessarily have that organic thread to follow?
Well, I have a technique that I use. I had a recording studio on a Greek island, and I was able to go outside with battery operated equipment and take an electric guitar and a distortion pedal and an echo and a cassette deck and just sit in the sunshine and get weird guitar sounds and just play and play and play. And if I heard something I liked, if I came up with a little idea that I liked, I would press play on the tape recorder, which would be the equivalent of your phone's voice notes. And I would just play that thing a little while, and then stop, and then just return to finding weird sounds or finding chords. And when I found 2 chords that sounded great, I'd record another voice note. And pretty soon, after a week, I had a half an hour cassette on both sides filled with these little short ideas. And then there was a separate process where I just decided I'm going to listen to everything I did. And I wrote down, from 13 seconds to 20 seconds, there's a great idea to build a song out of. And then I'd have to learn what I did spontaneously and record it, and that build a song. So I think as long as you can play an instrument and just improvise, that you might come up with a 2 seconds or 5 second idea that you like, and then jot it down and forget about it and go do a bunch of those until you have a collection of things that you could really inspire yourself to build on.
What I take from that is this capacity, on the one hand, for playfulness, and then on the other hand, and this is something I think a lot of people get stuck on nowadays, is to not judge themselves. Like so many people, it feels like have this weight of, I should be something, or the devil's there telling them they're not good enough, or having this kind of savage type of voice. Did you ever experience that?
I did. I went through that. I was that guy. I was playing, as I said, I started playing piano at 8. I was in bands at 13, and already by 16, I knew I needed to write songs. If I want to leave my mark in the world, I got to write songs like Jimi Hendrix and John Lennon. And plus I was listening to classical music. So Bartók and Frank Zappa, these were big composers in my mind. So when I wrote something down, when I played a piano thing and made a song, I would write it down on notation paper, and it was very slow and very frustrating. And when I came back the next day and played it, I just thought it was terrible. And I'd rip up the paper, and I'd be very frustrated. And it took me 3 years, from 16 to 19, of complete failure and feeling frustrated and like I'm never going to be a composer. I just can't do it. I don't know how. And then at 19, I finished one song on organ. I played a song and I sang it. And I realized I just finished a song. Let me see if I can play it again from memory, because I didn't have a tape. I didn't know how to record yet. So I played the song again and I sang the words and I remembered it. It was like, oh my God, I just wrote my first song and I don't hate it. I played it 3 times in a row. I can remember it the next day. I remembered it. And so with that confidence from one song done, I then started my second song, and I didn't have the problem anymore. It was just like, once I got over that horrible hurdle, then the door of songwriting was open for experimentation, and it wasn't so scary anymore.
So what would be your advice to someone who's struggling with that demon in that way?
Try, get frustrated, get angry, rip it up, and then when you're ready, try again. Just keep on. If you feel like it's in your heart to be a songwriter and write music and express yourself that way, then you're going to have some bumps. It could be very difficult at first. You could have all the voices of your teachers and your enemies and your former bandmates who laughed at you and making you think you can't do it. But if you keep going, you might have a breakthrough, and like me, make 1,000 songs in your life and be pretty happy with them all, In
your life, if I may go into this area,
you can.
You've struggled with addiction earlier in your life, and a few different times, and you've gone through the valley of darkness, let's say, in different ways. Was there a connection between going down that path of addiction and the torment of that devil on your shoulder as a songwriter, or was it something else that provoked that period in your life?
Wow, that's interesting. I don't know. I don't know if there's a direct correlation. It was really terribly frustrating and awful when I couldn't write songs, or when I couldn't play, when I record myself playing and I thought I sounded terrible. I went with my band in the studio and I had to do a solo, and every time I heard the solo, it was, no matter how hard I tried, it just sounded awful, and it made me feel embarrassed and ashamed. That was a difficulty. And it was also a great difficulty being addicted to drugs and having to spend all my money and time getting drugs, and the danger of being robbed or overdosing, that was also, a horrible situation. And luckily I got through that somehow with the grace of God and lots of help from my family. And but I don't know if I can't directly correlate them.
How did you, if it's okay with regard to heroin, because like a lot of people experiment with drugs and then some people fall over that edge, and then it's from what I understand, it's so hard to come back once you've gone over that thing into heroin. It's the big H. And how did you come back from that?
Well, I had an intervention. My family tricked me and my girlfriend to come back from New York to Seattle, where they said they were going to send us on a holiday and we're going to have all this good stuff happen. And when we got there, her family and my family were together in a house that they didn't even know each other. They're from different towns. So I already knew something weird is up. And they had planned to each one read a story that they had written about what I had become and what my life had become. And at the end of the story was you must go to treatment, or we're not going to give you any more money to fund your habit or to pay your rent and this and that. So that was the mechanism that was given to me to have an opportunity to go to a treatment center and get help. And I didn't even think I had a problem. I was so drug addiction and most addictions make you so far in denial. I thought my girlfriend had trouble, so I'll go to treatment so that she can get better, that kind of thing.
So the act of grace was the intervention, but it was also I would imagine that it came through you having the capacity to feel that love of those people that wanted you so very much to get yourself better.
I'm not sure I felt the love of them because at my intervention, every time my mom or somebody would read a letter about, how witnessing my total degradation and my nearness to death, I would just pat them on the back and say, I'm glad you're getting in touch with your feeling. I just became this weird lawyer, this denial, oh, this is good for you to get your feelings out, Mom. I'm okay. Don't worry about me. Just send me back to New York with some money and I'll be just fine. I was really in denial. But when I got to the treatment center, a couple things happened that helped me kick into my recovery. One of them was there was a lawyer and a heavy metal student and a housewife, and they were all there for the same reason. Their addictions to drugs and alcohol had gotten them in so much trouble that their family sent them there, or the law sent them there. And when they told their story, it sounded like my unique rock and roll story that I thought made me so special. And yet if that kid says the same thing and that housewife says the same thing, that what's so special about me? I had to think, is there something else that makes me me, other than the fact that I can use more drugs than everybody else and I've got this terrible problem? So that was one thing. And the second thing was that in addiction, I'd gotten to the point where I thought, well, I'm probably going to die. I'm probably going to overdose. I'm in New York. It's the only way I can cope. And I kind of resigned myself to, going out as a junkie, not making it, just I won't have long to last, but this is how I'm doing it. I made a mistake. I started using drugs and now I'm going to have to pay for it. And suddenly, in treatment, I was sleeping well and I was playing tennis and eating meals and talking to people. Suddenly whoa, I can move my body. I can move my arms and legs. This is incredible. I never thought I would do that again. So I kind of felt like I'd been given a big second chance, and that really worked. I thought, I'm going to go with this. I don't want to go back to the way I was. This seems like a much better way to live. And so, it just worked. I was ready for it. I'd had 20 years of using drugs. And at that moment, I thought, okay, I'm feeling fine. I could go on regularly without it.
When you say there was another me that I could find, in my own life, I had a very deep rupture. And one of the things that sort of really lives with me came through the therapist who I saw, who in a way saved my life, said that he always talked of the sort of potential true self. And the Zen Buddhists talk about this face that we have before we were born, this idea, and it always resonated with me. And when you had that sense of another me that you could find, I'm just wondering if you could talk about that a little bit more. The reason I ask is because whenever I think of Gordon Raphael, I feel you're so present and I feel like you're so within your skin. And I know that when you've one goes through those valleys of darkness, so to speak. You are so divorced from your own sense of being. So what was it that you found through that journey?
I think it was more like my rock star ego and all this, I was on stage at 18. I was in the biggest band in our town and we were making money while my other friends went to college. I was like, doing photo sessions and concerts and everything. So my big ego looked around that room and thought, wait a second, I'm so proud of myself. And yet the thing I'm proud of it's in them and how can I, what is so special about, I know I'm special, but if maybe it's not just taking drugs that makes me special. I had to look for something else that made me feel special to myself. It was kind of like an identity crisis where I thought that's what my special secret, but everybody else is the same here. So how can I be special if they're all saying the same story about the big parties and the constant drug use and the trouble and the horrible accidents and the chaos and the misery, all that was like, I thought that was my special story, but it was their special story. So I just was really searching quickly for an identity because I wanted to have an identity. I wanted to feel special and, intelligent and witty and cool, but it wasn't going to be doing the same thing. I had to find something more individual that was within myself. And I thought I could do that, after a bit of a journey. I would find something.
So what did you find and where did you find it?
What did I find? It's very cosmic. This is a very cosmic thing.
Let's go there, Gordon.
But pretty much, I went to Los Angeles immediately after because I didn't want to live with my dad. I didn't want to be in rainy old Seattle. I couldn't go back to New York because I had too many bad associations with my drug use there. So I decided to go to the only other music center, which was Hollywood. So I got on a Greyhound bus with my last money and I had a friend waiting for me down there to let me sleep on his couch and let me eat his food while I found my way. And basically I floundered around for a little bit, but I didn't use drugs. And the more time I spent, like months would pass where I wasn't using drugs. I was just trying to figure out who I was and what I was going to do to stay alive. Like good things, really good things and coincidences and kind of magic stuff started happening. Like I worked at Guitar Center and on the first day, some giant rock star bought a keyboard from me and then he couldn't figure out how to use it. So he came and brought me to his house, paid me handsomely, let me show him what I could do on his keyboard that he bought. And then he started taking me around to recording sessions because he realized, wow, this guy can play real well and he's kind of smart with music. So suddenly, just one thing after the led to the other, like all the natural good roads were able to be taken instead of blocked because I was just committed to trying life on life's terms and not using drugs. And then so many good things started happening that I wouldn't even think to go backwards to the misery and squalor and danger that I lived in. Like I didn't want to trade working with the guy from Gang of Four and going to Hollywood to nice people's home studios and helping them write songs. Like that was really what I wanted to do. And now I was doing it. So everything just went up from there.
I love what you said, to try life on life's terms.
Yeah.
It's such a poetic idea. And yet, throughout the course of your life, it's interesting what you said about sort of grace earlier as well, because one of the things that I love about your wonderful book, The World is Going to Love This, is that you're so frank and so honest about, I mean, in this sort of like gallingly beautiful way, because you feel the lows with you, because you're like, I'm reading and I'm going like, oh, I wouldn't have said that, but it's made beautiful by the fact that it's like, no, this is how it happened and this what happened. Do you think that getting to that deeper you was part of the thing that enabled you to be able to have that sense of honesty? Because you feel like you've got such a sense of honesty with the world.
I don't know. Part of it came from my best friend, Sarah. Like she's from Sheffield. She's from the north of England and they are honest. Like they will just say whatever comes, and not only are they honest, but all my life I was like theatrical and like if I felt sad, perhaps I could put on a happy face or tell a joke and hopefully get by. And most people would just go with whatever show I was putting on. But the Northern English, she looked at me and said like, you say you're happy, yet you're digging your nails into your finger. Oh, you're not happy. Why are you lying? I'm like, I don't lie.
Wow.
So I had a lot of confrontations with my friend Sarah that showed me that, you think you're a real honest guy, but you actually are hiding a lot, and you've got a lot of decorations on the truth. And so I think that was something that helped me.
But it's a lifelong journey, isn't it? Like, because you have to keep on going back there. And one of the things that I love, so to pivot, we've got here, The World Is Going to Love This, which is this wonderful book, and it's Up from the Basement with the Strokes. And first of all, congratulations on this book, Gordon.
Thank you very much.
Because I bought it with a view to researching the podcast, and because I was interested in time, but what I wasn't expecting was to read a great book. I knew it would be good because I've known you for years, and I know how you do things, but the writing is so on point. And did you know that you could write like this?
I kind of thought I knew I could write, but I could only write short stories or little stories or something short. I never thought I had it within me to write a book because it requires sitting down for long periods of time. And if I have free time, I want to go walk to a coffee shop or go look at people in the street. I don't want to sit with a pen and write for a long time. So,
but there's a very crisp sense of description that is something that is, I mean, that's a sort of like special gift. So did you always have that acuteness with being able to describe things in a very...
I think so. I think so. I mean, that's why I wanted to write lyrics and things just to talk about, and also describing unusual situations or things that are in my imagination that don't even exist. I think I always wrote pretty well. I have a funny story about the book, which was when I finished the book, I went to go see my English friend, Sarah. And I said, I finished the book. She said, what do you mean you finished your book? You've only been working on it a couple of months. I said, no, I'm done now. She said, aren't you going to edit it? And I kind of like put my hand on my face because I thought she doesn't know that I'm actually the kind of writer that doesn't need editing. You know, I always just put the pearls of wisdom on the page and it's pretty much done. She doesn't know that I don't need editing. So she looked at me she screwed up her face and looked at me and she said, I don't want to read it quite yet. So a couple of days later, I went home and I read my book, and just even on the first page, I'm like, what? That isn't even a sentence. Oh my God. It's like 2-page long sentence, and there's like 900 commas that aren't needed there, and nobody could make it. Oh my God. And I basically started editing my book. And not only did I edit it once, but I edited it 4 times, and it took much longer to edit than it did to write. So I learned something about my writing.
And what was the spark that made you finally get to this book?
The pandemic knocked on our door and they told us to stay home. And I can't go to the coffee shop. I can't walk and see people. I can't go to the club. I can't go on stage. I can't even go to the studio. So I'm just used to being around people all the time. I love being in the studio, then go for a walk, then go to a restaurant. My whole life is built around being around people. So suddenly I was in my room by myself thinking I'm not allowed out and I can't go out tomorrow and who knows what's going to happen. I thought I'd write some music. I tried to write a song and I kind of got bored. And I thought, what the hell am I going to do with myself to make me not go crazy? And this little voice said, like, remember you said you were going to write a book, but you never thought you would? Why don't you write the book now? And I just, okay. I just heard the voice say it. And I sat down with my laptop and found a place to start and started the book right away and was able to just stay focused on it for days and days on end, writing every day, finishing chapter after chapter. It was quite effortless. It took time, it took focus, but telling the stories and remembering what happened was quite liberating and fun.
So it feels like sort of an expression of a very deep and intense type of work. Because a lot of writers, when they write, they have a sort of very strict regime that they follow in order to get the book done. So it's like from 5 o'clock in the morning till 11, then done, for the day. But you really actually, it was a daily process and you ground your way through.
Yeah, I just basically wrote all the time that I wasn't like eating or going for little walks by the canal in Hebden Bridge. I wrote and wrote and wrote. But the thing was that one of the reasons I wanted to write this book is because everywhere I go in the world for the past 20 years, people seem to ask the same questions over and over again. Like, what was it like working with the Strokes? How did you get that drum sound? What was Julian Casablanca? And I've said these stories so many times, that's why it was easy to write.
Yeah.
So now it's time for that story. And I actually had to use a very interesting website called setlist.io, which tells every show that every band played and where they played, what year they played it, you know. And so when I wanted to know what happened first, did I see this show or did I go over here? Where was I? I could look up that show and find out what date it was to make sure that I was telling my story accurately. It was like a reference website for my book. It was really lovely to have that.
Very useful. Like, what a great tool to have.
Yeah.
But in your growing up, did you have a journaling rhythm or routine?
I always had, like, I have shelves in my room, bookshelves filled with all my notebooks. I always wrote notebooks, and I'd write my miserable love experiences. I'd write weird poems. I'd draw in them. I would kind of write my appointments in them. So I have always, up till recently, I don't do it as much anymore, but I always wrote and wrote and wrote just on my own, you know, dream journals, all this kind of stuff.
Well, that's the thing. The book is so dense with memory without being too long, which is a lovely thing. But that was something that really caught my mind. Is I felt very invited, you know, into the studio. I could smell the smell of the denim or the holes in the wall that you were drilling. You know, because it's descriptive without being indulgent in the description, which I really enjoyed. And I think it's just a useful reflection for anyone listening that this capacity to remember one's life is a very underrated thing nowadays, because we're so quick to forget our experience because of this addiction to the now and everything sort of having to happen immediately. How has the world changed psychologically from how you were growing up with the advent of social media?
Yeah. I mean, I think, I don't know if I would do the things I do now if I had a cell phone at the age of like 13, 15, even 20, you know. It was a completely different world where if you didn't do something meaningful, you would just be bored out of your mind. You had no distractions other than what you could create. There was, like, when we grew up, there were 4 or 5 television stations that all went off the air like at midnight, and there wasn't cable, and the shows were generally for someone else, like someone's parents or something. There were a couple good shows on, like Batman or the Archies or the Jackson 5 or that kind of stuff that I like to watch. But generally speaking, all I had was my record player and all those albums and reading the albums and looking at the covers, and all you knew, you didn't have all this gossip and know everybody's bad dating romances. You just saw this picture of David Bowie with red hair, and you had to imagine, who is this guy? He must be like Superman. He must be like, God, look at those boots. What kind of guy would that be? Oh, I want to be like that. You just, everything you did was just fantasizing off of a photo. You know, I spent hours looking at the record covers and reading each word and, you know, all that. So that was a very different way to grow up. And I quickly adapted to digital. You know, I'm on my phone and my laptop just day in, day out, from the moment I wake up until the moment I go to sleep, you know, looking at a million things a day.
But you have that fabric of out of that boredom and the, you know, being compelled to be within life from all of those years. So what would you say the role of boredom is in developing a creative mind?
Yeah, it's because I struggle with it now because I'm never bored. So I don't create as I work. I'm very interested in all the things I was always interested in, but I don't sit down and like look for melodies, and I don't like write as much music nowadays because I'm never bored. Even when I'm at a train station in the subway waiting for the train, I'm not bored because I'm seeing who's liked my last photo and who's like talking about my new album I released and all these things. So I think for me, it's very dangerous not to be bored.
Yes. Well, I think it is. I think it is for everyone. One of the things I love about you as an individual and your story that you've had is that you know in such a deep level both the success and the troughs of having to really struggle creatively. And at the moment, and it was something that brought me a lot of joy as someone who knows and loves you. It's just seeing that it's like this compounding interest that there always was in you. It feels like it's almost as if the dam is beginning to sort of break into like a broader ocean, if you like. Just, when I see like your reels on Instagram, which are getting suddenly millions of plays and the rest of it, it's fascinating. But that sounds like it also comes with a cost in terms of your creative being.
Yeah, well, there's a couple things. First of all, I spend the time I would have spent writing songs and organizing bands and going on tour, just like looking at 9 different news broadcasts, and making sure that I know every angle, what the conservatives are saying, what the left wing's saying, what the Al Jazeera is saying, what Democracy Now! Is. I just want to know everything, which is, a different kind of usage of my time. But at the same time, I still feel the same way I was when I was 16, where I don't think I've accomplished what I've set out to do yet. And so I'm kind of like desperate, and I'm talking about my music all the time, and I'm trying to show people, and I'm putting it out, making it available, and doing videos and artwork all the time. I'm creating something and reaching out. I'm still kind of, I really want my music to go out in the world. I want people to know my songs, all these things. I want to play more shows. I want to do everything. So and I'm kind of glad about that.
Yeah, I
would hate to be over, like, I already had, I'm so sick of that. I don't want to do it anymore. No, I'm just like, I'm just driven to make a video about a song that I made and talk about it and show people the song. So I have this great connection to my creative work.
I feel that so very much in you, that there's still that sort of spark and that fire. And I mean, it's so interesting, isn't it, about that sort of the peril of certain types of success, where wonderful to achieve all your goals on one thing, but I mean, what a terrible thing if you get to the age of 30 or 40 or 50 or 60, whatever it is, and things have become bland or boring, whatever. And I love that in you, that you've tasted success in so many different ways, and you're well-known human being, personality and producer, but you still got that fire. How do you keep yourself fresh?
Well, one thing before you answer that, it made me think of what would it be like when you can't even go to the park and sit in the park and like eat an ice cream and look at the people with their dogs because you're so famous that everybody, the minute you go to the park, all you're doing is like these people are asking you questions, wanting you to sign stuff and selfies. Like instead of enjoying your ice cream and seeing the dogs and going for a walk, you just can't even go out. Like I mean, I know people like that, and in a way, I'm so happy to go to the park and nobody knows who I am, and just like eat my ice cream and look for anybody I could maybe talk to or someone I might know, and if not, just enjoy the sunshine, the way the trees. I take pictures of the trees because they look so nice with the pink blossoms on them. That's really a blessing.
I always think of you a bit like the band The Cult, because The Cure as well, because they achieved this cult status, and yet they could still live, and they were so revered. And I think you've managed to hit like a very wonderful sweet spot. So when it comes to the modern musician, and what I love is that you can speak to you on the one hand about being very successful as a producer, and then on the musician side, you've played in in amazing bands, and your songs are wonderful stuff, but you also have that relation and that understanding of what the underground musician feels like. What's your take on streaming?
It's a new landscape, but to me nothing has changed. When I was 15 years old, I was calling my booking agent for my bands going like, hey, our guitar player is the best guitar player in the city, and yet our band doesn't get the big paying jobs. The guy with the shiny shoes, who can't play as well as my guitar player, why is he getting more, it never made sense.
Yeah.
The guy with the shiny shoes could get paid more money than the guy who could play guitar like Jimi Hendrix. Okay, that never made sense. It also never made sense that in the old days, you had to live in New York or Los Angeles and meet a guy from a record label who thought he could make money from you. And a few people got signed. And out of those few people that got signed, some of them sold lots of records and went on the radio and went on tour. But most of the musicians who lived in the United States they only could play at the local bar the covers of the guys that were famous. They could play the Eagles and they could play, Stairway to Heaven at the local bar and make enough to maybe pay rent on their, house in some little town, right? It wasn't like, oh, in the 70s, it was so much easier to make, you had to go through a lot of hoops, live in a city where these labels were, be accepted by these men, who are looking at their suits thinking, I can make money off that. Okay, let's sign them up. And we'll give them like 5% and we'll keep the rest of the money. That it was always like that. Yeah. And now it's the same way. Oh, you're getting 0.0004 cents per stream. Okay, so that's one part of the equation. The other part of the equation is, as an artist, it's not just your job to learn the C major scale. You're thinking of creativity. You're thinking of, I'm on this earth. What do I want? I want to make a melody, but then what I want to do, I want people to hear it. How am I going to make people hear it? Well, maybe if I dress in a silver clown suit and suspend myself from my ankle, have my friend film me, and then we put it on TikTok, maybe people will see that and then listen to, there's creative ways to get attention. And it's the same thing as when you're in high school and there's all these girls and you're just a guy, and how are you going to get their attention? What are you going to do? You're going to talk to one or meet them at a dance. It's the same thing. Getting popular in the world is the same problem that you have as a child making a friend or getting a group of friends or, being sick, getting along with people. It's the same kind of science with music.
One of the things that a lot of musicians struggle with is this sort of resistance to social media. They have this love, like not this love. They have this sort of like this tormented relationship. And there's a gray zone with it. They put stuff up. They are from time to time. They know they should be doing more, but they don't. They just kind of like they feel difficult with it. And something that I really like about what you said, and I just want to follow up on this, because you were like, look, this is how you have to do it nowadays. This is the mechanism that exists. You have to figure it out. And when I look at your Instagram and your social media, now suddenly you've I think you've had sort of 15,000 extra people follow you or something crazy, even in the last year after all those years doing stuff. And you've been putting a lot of love in terms of the vehicle of your message. It's like you figured out the fun in how to put them out or something. And so would you say that that's a part of the figuring it out and putting it in, kind of to embrace it and go with it? Or where are you at? 'Cause you feel like you've figured it out and you're getting down with it.
Okay. I'm 10 years old and my dad put Sgt. Pepper's in my hand. Just was released. Just came out. My dad brings Sgt. Pepper's. I never really heard the Beatles before. I didn't really care much about music. Not too much at all. And I open it up and I look at these weird satin suits and how their mustaches are and their hair and the yellow color and the writing and what is this thing? It's so visually incredible. And then Jimi Hendrix come out and he's got like this afro and this psychedelic tie and everyone looks the same in the band. It's a fisheye purple. So music for me, great music was never divorced from this intense artistic, photographic representation that went along with the music. And so I always associated great music had to go with visuals and how fun, because I love painting and I love to see paintings and it's just another creative expression. So like from an early age, even like before anything, I would like have someone come to my house and take a picture of me like in my best clothes. I just like pose for this picture and say, print me some copies. And then I go down to the copy machine and make little posters of me with my phone number and say like synthesizer player, Gordon Raphael. And I'd go to a phone pole where nobody was except for some kids ride their bike by, and I'd like tack it up there so in case somebody would see me, they'd know that's me. That's me, and I play keyboards and I look cool, and like I was always looking for a way to put my picture out or talk about my stuff. And so social media, I'm the perfect candidate for it because hey, I have about 4,000 or 5,000 pictures of myself in my archives, and I've got tons of songs and videos I've collected. So this is my big chance to show it.
Did you go from a resistance to it about figuring it out Or did you realize that very quickly?
As soon as MySpace came and you could put your 4 pictures of you up and a song that people could hear and then send it to somebody, and then go find more people to meet that you could show how cool you were. I mean, that was like made for me. That was made for me.
But I love you're also sort of linking that lightness of touch you bring in your studio philosophy to social media. And I think that's a lovely perception, because so many people get the toxicity gets into them. They overthink it. They want to use it just for putting opinions and shouting out, rather than saying, well, there's a way to connect people, and there's a way for it to be a vehicle or a magazine of the different influences and styles and things that you're excited about.
I think that has to do with, I was always really interested in humor and laughing and parody and like making a bit of a joke, and that the secret of life is about, do your best, but do not take yourself too seriously. Otherwise people are going to yawn so much. The best way to get people's attention is to look like you're enjoying yourself, and they want to know how do you do it, and they want to find out how they can enjoy themselves. I think that's a great message.
Yes.
So I tend to put a lot of funny stuff. I'll put, something very important about my new album, and then pictures of all the different, flowering plants in the park right near each other, because I'm interested in those. And I find that they go together. Someone might say, you're losing focus. Your brand is so confusing. Well, I don't even, I just, and yeah, when I go on a video and I'm taking pictures, I tend to be very funny, or I do voiceovers that are kind of like, is he serious or is it nonsense? Or I like that ambiguity.
But does it ever take away from the primary part of the artistic process for you? Do you ever find that there's a sense of distraction? The reason I ask is that, I tried to, in the last 2 or 3 years, to get better at social media in terms of being sort of, more disciplined, putting out, enjoying it, just like you're saying, exactly the same type of thing. But I do find that as soon as I get really going into the writing or the doing of actually primary creation, or trying to get better as a musician for that matter, I suddenly forget about it, and I'm 3 days later, like, oh God, I'm being hopeless online. How do you manage that?
I think that you have to definitely have an inner sense of your priorities. And if your priorities are, it's time to write a song, or for me, I have to go record 10 bands in New York, like you have to, there's a great joy in writing a song. You should put your time in that. You should, that I think you'd have to pick your priorities and stick to them, and be, don't worry about it if you miss some posts. It's not as important as if you're finishing something you can really talk about later or show people.
Do you have like a system, or like when you're kind of in your groove, do you go like, I'll try and do one a day, or
no,
like this?
I do one whenever I think whenever it's just like when music, whenever it hits me. So like I might go home after a long day in the studio, be a little tired, but I got like 3 hours till I go to sleep. I might think, hey, you have a new album coming out in a couple of days. Why don't you do something? And luckily I can do stuff with my photo editing program, and I can do stuff with my video editing program, and I got an archive full of finished mastered songs. So I'm going to get this old footage from that thing, and I'm going to turn it green, and then I'm going to talk over it and tell the story for a second, maybe make a joke, and then put the sound underneath it, and then stick it up.
Yeah. Lovely. So go on. To bring towards the end, to also bring us back to the start, if you like. So we're in the book, if I remember correctly, you talk about in my holy sacred East Village.
Oh yes.
The reason I want to go back to the start at the end is because for me, when I look at the book and the shape of your life, these waves, it's like this cine wave, almost like you look at Pro Tools when you have a sound wave and it's going up and down. The thing that gave me shivers many times was the capacity where you hit a dead end, and then right at the bottom, it's like, wow, a turning point came once again for Gordon in his life. And there's been many, it seems, in your life, a few we've discussed already. And it feels also that you're in a particular rise at the moment. So long may that last. And congratulations. Yeah, well, congratulations on the new album. So in going back to this time in the East Village, which was one of your turning points when you started working with the Strokes at Transporterraum.
Very well said.
And and when you look back to that time? What's the emotion that comes up between this mythology of your sacred, holy East Village and meeting this band that you knew had something and that you could bring something towards in your studio, everything getting into synergy? Because what people that might not know your life story so well will not realize is that comes after periods of addictions, after periods where you've been evicted so many times, you've been running out of a damn church when it's been on fire, and all of these crazy stories. And so what is your memory about the color of that time, and also the message that you can give about such times coming around at the peak of a wave in life?
Well, before I came to New York that particular time to live here, I had just experienced the Seattle grunge movement, and my band Sky Cries Mary was signed and we were touring, and everything I'd ever wanted seemed to come to me. I could pay my own rent, a publishing deal, buying synthesizers, making studio, everything was going great. And so when I came here, I thought, well, I guess that's over now. You know, I'm at the age where I now have lived my peak rock and roll days, and I was touring and making albums and videos, and people loved our band. And so I didn't expect that the next thing that was going to happen, meeting the Strokes and recording their music, was going to take me on another a journey where I got to go live in England and Berlin and travel around the world like I never thought I would, and just get so much love from people, even to this day, from those from recording some music. Like, people are still like thumbs up or hugs and like writing me very lovely things all the time. And so it was just this other thing where I thought, well, I guess it's over now. Seattle's gone to sleep again. And I don't know what I'm going to do in New York. I certainly don't have any connections, and it doesn't look like rock and roll is doing anything right now. And then suddenly, 2 years after I moved here, suddenly Rough Trade signed the Strokes, and the NME was loving it, and the English people were liking it, and they were getting record deals, and we were recording the album. And I don't know, that was a huge rocket ship. It was like such powerful momentum and so positive, so very positive.
What's the message for so many people out there who are listening it, who are struggling mentally in a really hard point? What does that story in your life, what are the words that you can give them encouragement and hope for out of that time?
I guess it's like, just when you think you can't stand anymore and you can't take anymore and everything's over and you have no idea what's going to happen, you never know when you're going to turn a corner and the next best thing happens, and you're suddenly within a very short amount of time in a completely different place that's extremely powerful and good.
And Gordon, if this were to be a moment where you could shut your eyes and give the Gordon Raphael message of something out to the world to close things, I'm wondering if you'd give me that honor to tell us.
Well, there was a very popular poster when I was in high school, and I'd like to quote it for you. Keep on trucking.
My dear Gordon, thank you so much this wonderful day. What a full day. It's been a blessing from start to finish.
Thank you very much. It was really fun doing the podcast with you too.
I'll see you at the top of the Billboard charts.
All right,
with Wicked Things.
when this gets out, you don't know what's going to happen.